Okay, hello everybody. Let me also extend my very warm welcome to all of you. It's great to see so many people here today. So, like Professor Gulliver just said, my name is Christina Angelopoulos. I am an associate professor here at the Faculty of Law. I specialize in intellectual property law. And I am also, and this is why I'm here to speak to you today, I am currently the director of the faculty's undergraduate law program, or the law Tripos program, as we call it. And what I'd like to do this morning is to provide you with a brief overview of that program that hopefully you will find useful. Now, to be specific, my objective will be to talk in general terms about studying law. What is that like? What does that mean? And particularly about studying law here at Cambridge in this faculty. I assume, of course, that you are all here today because you are trying to decide precisely if that is something that you would like to do. So, is this a subject, the detail of which you are interested in exploring, and exploring specifically in an academic way? Can you see yourselves pursuing careers as practicing lawyers in the future after you've finished your studies? And would you enjoy your student years studying law at this institution compared to any of the other great law schools that exist in this country or in any other country that you may be considering? Now, these are, of course, very big decisions in any person's life, and obviously I can't answer them for you. But what I can try to do, and what my colleagues are going to be trying to do throughout the rest of this event, is to give you the information which hopefully you will be able to use, you will find useful in making that decision. And as you approach submitting university applications later this year. So, what is it like to study law at Cambridge? First of all, a note on the terminology. The undergraduate law program here is a BA program, so it's a Bachelor of Arts in Law. Sometimes you will also see it referred to as an LLB, so a Bachelor of Laws, hence the two L's. As I mentioned a moment ago, in Cambridge's somewhat arcane and idiosyncratic vernacular, it is called the Law Tripos program. And that is how you'll often see it referred to on the faculty's website or perhaps in any other promotional material which you might have encountered. Don't be put off by this. Apparently, the word tripos is derived from the three-legged stool that Cambridge students used to sit on in the past to take their final exams. Let me reassure you that nowadays the seating is much more comfortable. But more than that, I like to think that our approach to the study of the law in this institution is a forward-thinking and a modern one. So on that note, and without meaning to brag, it's worth pointing out that, as you are probably aware, we are a world-leading law school. We're consistently ranked in the top 5 law schools internationally and as one of the top 2 or 3 law schools here in the UK. We do like to think that those rankings are in fact reflective of the quality of our program and how we teach. Certainly, we have a very strong ethos in terms of how we go about teaching law in Cambridge. One thing that's particularly worth emphasizing is that we see excellence in teaching and excellence in research. And of course, we are also a research institution. So we see these two things as intertwined, as going hand in hand, so that our approach to legal education is very much a research-led one. To this end, our aim is that the teaching staff at this faculty are not just simply research active, but are in fact producing cutting-edge research. They are people who are leading the national and international policy debates in their areas of expertise and who are really pushing the boundaries of their subjects. In our faculty, this is seen as essential. For us, the study of the law is not simply about reading a textbook, a statute, a court judgment. It's also about exposing our students to the insights of people who are at the forefront of their discipline. And I'm going to return to why we think this is important later on in this presentation. But for now, let us focus on the details. What exactly do we teach? Now, when I first started studying law at a very different institution in a very different country, my younger sister took a look at my lecture timetable and she observed that it seemed somewhat repetitive. All of my lectures were on law. She went on to pursue a science degree, but she was not incorrect. There does, in fact, tend to be a very strong emphasis on teaching law at law school. But law comes in all sorts of different flavors. Here in Cambridge, our law papers are split into what we call foundation subjects and optional papers. Foundation subjects are taken by all of our students. This is partly because rules on professional qualification require that applicants can show that they have studied these subjects. In fact, those rules have actually now changed in England and Wales. They changed a few years ago for solicitors, but they remain in place for barristers. So most of our students actually do continue to take all of the foundation subjects in order to keep their options open. It's also, at any rate, worth emphasizing that these subjects are foundational in the sense that they cover core areas of the law with which every good lawyer should be familiar, regardless of their specific professional aspirations. So the foundation subjects are the following. We have criminal law, tort law, constitutional law, which our students take in their first year. In their second year, the students take contract law and land law. And then finally, we have equity and European Union law, which come in the third year. Now, alongside these foundation subjects, we also offer a large range of optional papers, and these are available to our second and our third year students. Optional papers include what we call full papers, and these cover subjects such as international law, human rights law, labor law, or my own area of expertise, intellectual property law. But in addition to that, we also allow our third year students to take what we call half papers. That is to say, shorter courses, which are focused on more highly specialized topics. And as the name suggests, 2 half papers would essentially correspond to a full paper. Our half papers cover areas like animal rights law, comparative law, environmental law and sustainable development, banking law, landlord and tenant law. We also offer our third year students the option to write a dissertation, and they do this by joining what we call seminar groups. These seminar groups meet throughout the year, and in this way they provide the opportunity to students who are writing a dissertation in a similar area to exchange ideas, to provide feedback to one another, and to present work in progress. And of course, our dissertation students also benefit from supervision by an expert in the area who provides them with the guidance and advice that they need to successfully tackle their project, which will, of course, be their first attempt at conducting research themselves. Our seminar papers cover areas such as criminal law and justice, private law, public law, family law, and these are just a few examples. So that is what we teach, but how do we go about teaching it? Now, there's a couple of dimensions to this question. One is the very practical question of how do we actually deliver our teaching? And then there's the more philosophical question of what we are trying to achieve through our teaching. What are we trying to make sure that our students get out of the Law Tripos program? So I'm going to start with the first, easier, more straightforward, practical question. There are three basic building blocks to a legal education at this institution. We have lectures, we have what we call supervisions, that Professor Gulliver already mentioned earlier, but which in some other institutions are called tutorials, small group teaching. And then we also have individual study. And sorry, that's the wrong slide. Individual study. And I have to admit, there's quite a lot of that to do if you choose to pursue a law degree at Cambridge. Now, lectures are delivered by the faculty in lecture halls such as this one. In fact, a lot of our first year foundation core subjects are delivered in this very lecture hall. Students from all of the different colleges in Cambridge will come together for lectures. So in the foundation papers that everybody takes, there will be about 200 to 250 students in the lecture theatre. For an optional paper, by definition, numbers will be lower. Students will typically have about 2 or 3 lectures per week on each of the subjects they are taking, and this works out to about 10 hours of lectures a week in total. In the lectures, what happens is that the lecturers will be aiming to provide a framework understanding of the specific subject. Although they might also, well, they will also dive a little bit deeper into trickier issues that might be harder to understand simply from studying the textbook. And they will also emphasize any newer judgment aspects, such as, for example, a new court judgment, a statute that has recently been adopted, and which have not made it yet into any of the reading. The syllabus for a given law paper does tend to be quite expansive, so lecturers will not be trying to cover everything that there is to say about the specific area. That would anyway be impossible. But what they are trying to do is to put in place a sound basis, a sound knowledge basis, upon which our students can then build with further work via their supervisions, and of course, that all-important individual study. So that brings us to our supervisions, our small group teaching, which is, of course, one of Cambridge's major strengths, like Professor Gulliver just mentioned, as there are very few universities that provide this type of teaching, at least to the extent that actually happens over here. So supervisions are small group teaching sessions. We offer them to our undergraduate students. They are arranged by the colleges, not by the faculty, because this is, after all, a collegiate university. But that is not to say that the faculty is entirely uninvolved in supervision teaching. The faculty does coordinate some supervision teaching. But in addition, in all subjects, the faculty also provides guidance to supervisors. Most importantly, most of our faculty staff will also have college affiliations, and they will therefore provide supervision teaching in that capacity. And we also try to ensure that any college teaching staff are involved in life here at the faculty as well. Supervisions are held every couple of weeks in each subject. So in total, students will be having about 2 to 3 supervisions a week, and that works out to about 10 supervisions a year on each of the subjects that they are taking. So a supervision will take the form of meetings between the supervisor and 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 students. The supervisor will lead the discussion. The supervision will last for about an hour, and it will be based on what the students have already been exposed to in the lectures and, of course, in the reading that has been set for the supervision. Now, lectures generally involve sitting, much as you are doing right now, listening, making notes, maybe asking a few questions. But essentially, they're a rather passive form of taking in large amounts of information in a short period of time. On the other hand, supervisions are highly interactive, and students are encouraged to come prepared to participate, to ask lots of questions, to point out any areas of confusion that they might have, or anything that they haven't quite managed to grasp in the lectures or through their own research. And of course, the supervisor will also be asking their questions to the students in order to stimulate discussion, to make sure that everybody has a strong grasp of the key points, and to encourage the students to push their thinking deeper and further. Finally, the lectures and the supervisions can only really bear fruit when they are combined with the third pillar of our teaching model here at Cambridge, which is individual study. And our law students do spend a lot of time sitting in the library, in their rooms, in their colleges, reading cases, reading legislation, reading textbooks, reading academic journal articles, and also writing essays, writing answers to problem questions. And I think you're going to have a detailed explanation of what problem questions are in one of the next presentations. It's important to emphasize, however, that personal study is not something that has to happen in splendid isolation. Here at the Faculty of Law, we intentionally do not grade our students on a bell curve, which means that they are able to see each other, not as competitors, but as helpers. And that is essential because, take for example the supervisions, the stronger the supervision group, the more a supervisor can cover, and the more the supervisor can stretch their students on the material. And similarly, working together with other students in preparation for supervisions, for lectures, revising material afterwards, can help students approach the same subject from different angles that they might not have otherwise considered, and to identify any potential misunderstandings or gaps from their own work. Okay, so these are the practicalities of how we teach, but why do we teach in this way, and what are we trying to achieve? I already alluded to this when I mentioned earlier that our teaching model is a research-led one. The reason why we take this approach is that the objective is to expose our students to people who specialize professionally in thinking about the law and who are particularly good at that. This is because in this institution, we're not interested in simply teaching the law as a set of rules that have to be learned off by heart. Of course, the law definitely comprises a lot of rules, and our students do have to find a way to grapple with this. There's no getting around that, because those are the basic building blocks that students have to understand as they make their way towards the more intellectually stimulating questions about the law, and those are our main target. These concern things such as how and why the law came to be, how and why an individual rule was formed, the historical context that shaped it, the social, economic, and political consequences of the rule's interpretation and its application in practice. In other words, our students aren't just taught what the law currently says. They are taught to think beyond these questions to matters such as whether the law is currently working. Is it solving the problem it was designed to solve? What is that problem? Does that problem persist? If it is not working as it ought to, how might the law be improved? How might it be reformed? A further important part of how we go about teaching the law in this institution is to emphasize different modes of thinking. So we encourage critical evaluation and we encourage contextual understanding. Again, our objective is not to fill up our students' heads with information about the law and then send them out 3 years later knowing everything they will ever have to know about the law. Apart from anything else, that would be impossible and futile, because the law often changes and sometimes quite quickly. This is unavoidable. It's an unavoidable consequence of democracy, of changes in government, but also of the constant evolution of our society. And of course, it is that society that the law seeks to govern and to shape. Our resources change, our technology changes, our problems change. The power dynamics between different factions in our society change, and therefore our goals also change. And with all of this, the law changes too. So to cover this gap, one of our key objectives is to teach our students how to work with the law, how to think about the law and how to write about it in a way that is clear, insightful, and coherent. And so, even though the content of the rules that we may teach may change, so that some of those rules might actually be out of date before our students have even finished their law degree, the skills that they will acquire at this institution will be skills that can take them forward into whatever it is that they decide to do next. Now, of course, even after all of this, you might still need more information before deciding if law at Cambridge is the right choice for you. And this makes sense, as I do recommend that you take this decision seriously. There's a few things that I could recommend for this purpose if you haven't come across them already. The first is a book called What About Law, which has been written, in fact, by a few members of this law faculty, not by me. The book does take a closer look at the foundation subjects, the core subjects, which I mentioned earlier, in order to explore some of what it means to study constitutional law, tort law, equity, or whatever it might be. There are lots of other similar books out there as well. This particular book, I think it was being sold in a stall outside, but alongside other books as well. I would recommend reading something of this kind because it will give you a sense of the kinds of issues, the kind of material that law students have to engage with in the course of their studies. For more practical information, you might also want to take a look at the faculty's blog on Medium. This is called Think Cambridge Law, and I've put the URL in the slide, but I think a simple search, an online search, will also lead to it quite easily. Here you can find insights and advice on things such as how to prepare for the Cambridge Law interview, how to write a personal statement in your application, but also examples of the day-to-day life of our law students, as well as descriptions, brief descriptions and introductions into certain subjects, such as, for example, criminal law or international law. And finally, there is another important dimension to the question, is law at Cambridge right for me? And that is something that I do want to talk about before I finish. Now, I mentioned earlier that Cambridge does have its own special jargon, and that can sometimes seem a little bit intimidating. And in fact, there's lots of things about Cambridge which can seem very intimidating, not least of which is the institution's long history and, of course, its very strong reputation. And I know this from personal experience because I was very intimidated when I first arrived here, and I did not arrive here as a student. What I found, however, was a community that was very committed to inclusivity and diversity. So with this in mind, what I want to emphasize is that we at the law faculty feel very strongly about admitting students who are intellectually able, irrespective of social, racial, religious, financial considerations. We want to encourage people from all different walks of life to apply to Cambridge, and we want to make sure that each applicant is assessed as fairly as possible. So we welcome applications from anybody who feels that they have the interest and the drive and the potential to do well at our institution. Now, I'm sure you're going to hear a lot more about that as you move through today's program. That does bring me to the end of what I wanted to say. So I very much hope that what I said was helpful. I hope that you enjoy your day today, that you get as many of your questions answered as you can, and that this event helps you reach a conclusion in terms of deciding whether you want to study for a law degree or not. Thank you very much.